Some of the most compelling fantasy worlds don't need endless lore. They feel rich and immersive, even with shallow foundations. And in today's video, I am going to show you 5 world-building strategies that will help you develop lore quickly, while still leaving your readers with that satisfying sense of depth. Whether you're working on your novel or crafting your D&D campaign, these tips will make your world feel ancient, mysterious, and lived in, without spending years developing every little detail. Welcome to another episode of Just in Time World series on building deep fantasy lore with your host, Marie Mullaney. Let's dive straight into it with strategy number 1, leveraging reader expectations. One of the easiest ways to build a world that feels familiar and immersive is to leverage your readers' existing knowledge. When you base your setting on real-world history or familiar cultural touchstones, readers can fill in the gaps themselves, essentially enriching your world through their own knowledge. George R.R. Martin's world building is an absolute masterclass in using reader expectations. Much of the world of A Song of Ice and Fire is historical, matching reader expectations with medieval Europe. Where Martin deviates from the norm, like with the Wall, the Children of the Forest, the Long Seasons, and so on, that's the fantasy elements coming into play. So Martin leans on our own history to create his cultures and then weaves in the fantasy elements. This results in Westeros feeling lived in and ancient, with its own myths, legends, and historical events that shape the present. But actually, many of those myths and legends that Martin uses in Westeros, like the white stag being a mythical beast and all of those kinds of elements, come from our world. These are myths that people told about kings. You can even see this in the titles that he uses, because he uses classic medieval titles like king and duke and so on. It feels familiar. It feels like medieval Europe. So next time you're creating titles, consider whether you want to make up titles and let the reader feel as though they're really not in Kansas anymore because the titles are strange, or whether you want to evoke medieval Europe by using the titles of medieval Europe. Basically, where Martin doesn't need fantasy elements, he just lets reader expectations do all the work. This is even more evident in Essos, where the world building is far more shallow, as I said in my first video in this series linked in the information card. As an aside, if you want a more detailed look on how to use our history the way that Martin does with War of the Roses, I did do a video on that very topic, which is also linked in the info card. John Gwain uses a similar strategy with Norse mythology as a foundation for his Bloodsworn trilogy, even going so far as to use Norse words as the basis for his fantasy words, as I said in my previous video in the series, where we discussed building deep lore through languages. And of course, this kind of world building is absolutely ideal for historical fiction and fantasy world building. Let's look at an example from my favorite author, Jacqueline Carey. She manages reader expectations with exceptional skill in her historical fantasy series, the Kashil Legacy Trilogy. And Carey reimagines Europe with this alternate history where people like the Dangelines are descended from angels, which massively changes Europe. But still, she leans on our expectations of some things going the same way, like there having been a Rome, called in this case Tiberius, that Rome having a university, and the Skaldi being the Germanic tribes of the north representing a threat to the more southern Europe. And managing those expectations works really well in a historical setting. And if you want more detail on specifically historical world building, check out my interview with Jacqueline Carey. This strategy is really incredible for world building that feels deep. By using what your readers already know or what they could research, you can surprise them and keep them engaged with subversion, but without needing to create everything from scratch. You can let them lean on their imagination where you need them to. But leaning on the reader's expectations is not the only way to create fake depth. Let's move on to number 2. Create in-world stories. This strategy is all about creating in-world stories or legend that feels rich and meaningful. But here's the trick. Those stories don't need to be as deep as they seem. You're not writing a detailed history book. You're crafting snippets of lore that add flavor to your world without requiring extensive backstory or development. Think of it like giving your world a legendary coat of paint, a shiny surface that suggests depth but is really more functional than it looks. The beauty of this method is that these little tales and myths can hint at vast histories, but they don't actually have to exist in full. They're enough to convince the reader that there's a whole world behind them, even if you haven't fleshed it all out. Let me give you an example from my own work in Sangwheel Chronicles. This is a story from that world. In the distant past, terrible monsters ravaged the land, creatures made from the unclean joining of spirit and beast. Of these, the most fearsome was the Impundulu, the lightning bird. Its leather wings darkened the sky, and storms came at its bidding to ravage the lands. The people importuned the gods for aid, and the left-hand god heard their cries. He caused the hero Oswetu to be born. In his 15th year, the hero Oswetu tracked the Impundulu to its lair and slew the beast. And neither he nor the lightning bird were seen in the lands again. Now, that sounds like it's part of a rich and deep mythology, right? At least I really hope it does. But here's the thing. I haven't actually developed the full context or deeper history behind this legend. It fits with the general prehistory of the Kisangani continent, but I don't need to map out every detail in Oswetu's life or the exact nature of the gods or even if Oswetu himself existed. The story is there to add color to the world without bogging me down in endless developments. It shows the previous existence of vessels of the gods and what kind of heroic acts they did, and that's all I need to provide context for in my current story and the characters that exist in the story. This kind of world building is incredibly effective because it gives your world a sense of age and mystery. Readers will assume that there's more lurking beneath the surface. But you don't have to do the heavy lifting. You just need the right illusion of depth. In many ways, it's a tool that mirrors the way that real-world myths work. Think about legends we have today, like King Arthur or Hercules. They're rich in lore, but the actual details of their story often vary wildly, depending on who's telling the tale. The important part is that they create a sense of history and gravitas. You just really have to make sure that those stories absolutely vibe with your world. Because if they feel out of context, that won't create fake depth, that will create sloppiness. And no one wants sloppy world building. This technique can be applied to so many aspects of your world. Maybe you create stories about ancient wars, the origin of certain cities, or even tales of long-dead kings and queens. You can weave these stories into dialogue, artifacts, or cultural traditions to immerse the reader in the history of your world without needing the full history. Do you have such illusionary depth in your world? Or do you have plans to create such such illusion of depth now? Let me know in the comments below. Now, this strategy of illusory depth actually leads directly to our next strategy, selective depth, putting your effort where it really matters while leaving the rest for your reader's imagination. If you've been following this channel for a while, you will have heard me talk about the golf ball method in the first video in this series. The golf ball method is all about choosing where to go deep and leaving the rest of your world shallow. You build depth around key areas, your plot, characters, or themes, while leaving other parts of your world as broad strokes, dimples in the golf ball, basically. This allows your world to feel detailed where it matters and lets the reader's imagination fill in the gaps. I detailed this method quite extensively in my first video, so check that out if you need a recap. But suffice to say here, go deep when it adds to your plot or characters, or if you want to subvert reader expectations. In other words, you don't want them to leverage expectations. That's when you need to go deep. And I think that's enough coverage of that strategy since we did a whole video on it. So let's move on to strategy 4, leave gaps in your lore. One of the most effective ways to make your world feel deeper and more engaging is to leave gaps in your lore. These gaps can turn into tantalizing mysteries that invite readers to speculate and wonder, creating a sense of intrigue that keeps them hooked on your world. You don't have to explain everything in your world. In fact, sometimes the less you explain, the better. When you leave certain events, histories, or characters mysterious, you give readers a chance to use their imagination, and that makes the world feel as though they are filling in those blanks with what works best for them. Think of it like planting unanswered questions, the kind your audience loves to chew on long after they finish the story. A great example of this again comes from George R.R. Martin in The Shape of the Doom of Valyria. In A Song of Ice and Fire, Valyria is the ancient and mysterious empire from which the Targaryens and their dragons originated. Now, we know that Valyria was a vast and powerful civilization that controlled much of the known world because they had dragons. But one day, it all came crashing down in a cataclysmic event known as the Doom of Valyria. But here's the thing. Martin never fully explains what caused the doom. Was it a volcanic eruption? A sickness that caused the dragons to die? The result of dangerous sorcery gone wrong? We don't know for sure. And that's what makes it so compelling. The mystery of Valyria hangs over the story like a dark shadow. It's referenced many times, and the fallout from the event shaped the world's history in significant ways. But Martin leaves the actual details of the event vague. This gives the readers room to speculate and theorize and to imagine their own version of events. And this creates the sense that in this world, as in ours, there are mysteries of the past that will never be unveiled, and thus creates depth. But here's the important part. The gaps must feel intentional. You don't want your lore to feel incomplete or sloppy. No one wants sloppy world building. Instead, these gaps should feel like carefully placed pieces of a larger puzzle. Give your readers enough hints and clues to keep them invested, but not enough to solve the mystery entirely. So think about your own world building. Are there places where you can plant those tantalizing mystery? What are the unanswered questions about the past of your world that you don't have an answer for and that might spark questions with your reader? Let me know in the comments below. And now, let's talk about strategy 5. Embedding your lore in everyday life, a technique that really helped me make my world feel lived in. This strategy means weaving your world's history, culture, and mythology into the daily practices, rituals, and norms of your characters. By doing this, you give your readers the sense that your world isn't just a backdrop for your story. It's a living, breathing place where people work, where they live and die, guided by traditions, beliefs, and customs shaped by their lore. When you embed world building in the ordinary, you don't need to hit readers with massive info dumps. Instead, the details are revealed through the way that characters interact with their world on an everyday basis. This not only makes your setting feel more authentic, but it also gives you an opportunity to subtly introduce the richness of your lore without overwhelming the reader. So, let me give you an example from Sangwheel Chronicles. In Lumiaron, the main culture for Chronicles, I developed a system for timekeeping that reflects the culture of the people living there. Instead of clocks or sundials, my people use candle clocks, a system where the candle burns at a specific rate to measure time. So Lumiaries tell time by specifying the ring on the candle, and they express time-related idioms with things like the wax grows thick, meaning time is passing, or we're running out of wick, meaning we're running out of time. Their whole sphere of the candle clock creates sayings I can immediately use that give my world a deeper texture for very little effort on my part. And I contrast this with Kisangi, where a water clock is used, and that culture uses water clock-related sayings to express their time, like don't fill the clock with tears, which is the equivalent of don't cry over spilled milk. This kind of world building does a lot to give your world depth. But don't just take my word for it. Brandon Sanderson does the same thing in the Stormlight Archive with his concept of the safe hand. In the world of Roshar, women cover their left hand, known as the safe hand in public, as it's considered inappropriate or indecent to show that hand. This custom is ingrained into their daily lives, from the clothing they wear to the way that they interact with others. Shalon, a central character in the Stormlight Archive, always keeps her safe hand covered with a sleeve or a glove. And when she sketches or works, she has to adjust her movements to accommodate that covering. These small actions constantly remind the reader of the cultural norms and gender roles in Roshar without lengthy explanations. The safe hand is a small, subtle detail that permeates the world, and it tells us a lot about the culture, particularly in how it reinforces societal expectations. There's even a difference between highborn women who cover their whole hand and don't have fingers on the covering, and lowborn women who use a glove to cover their hand. This is embedding lore at its finest. It's always present, yet never overwhelming. There's also an amazing website where you can see the left hand bed of the ladies of Roshar. So, how can you use this technique in your own world building? It can be as simple as embedding bits of your world's mythology into common sayings, or having characters follow rituals that stem from old traditions. Maybe they touch a specific symbol for luck as they pass through doorways, for example, Or maybe they prepare a meal in a certain way because it is said to have spiritual significance. So, those are 5 world-building strategies that can help you create a rich, immersive world without drowning in endless details or spending years building your lore. Let me know in the comments which of these you've used in your own writing, or which of these you're going to try out next. And don't forget to give this video a like while you're down there. This is the end of the series on creating deep lore in fantasy worlds. I hope that you've enjoyed these videos, and keep an eye on the channel for a poll for a new series sometime after this episode airs. But don't despair, there will be plenty of other episodes to come in the next few weeks, just not specific series topics. And if you want access to all those videos right now, consider joining the channel like Aya, Tiffany, Dylan, and Patricio, and Katie and Tony, just-in-timers of the Build It in Wood and Stone level. All members, including those on the Build It in Straw level, get early access to my videos and help me in making better and higher quality videos. So thank you very much to all my members. However, don't feel obligated to support the channel financially. You can also show your support just by watching another video. And since you enjoyed this video, maybe check out my video on Show, Don't Tell, where I talk about organically giving the reader the lore of your world rather than info dumping it. And I will see you soon for another video from Just in Time Worlds, where we build what we need when we need it.